Hey there, welcome to the Thriving and Wellness Podcast with Haley and Kaitlyn. This podcast is for women who are tired of just surviving and are ready to truly thrive. It's time to reclaim your health and build trust in your body.
Join us as we myth bust nutrition topics, tackle your mindset, and dive into the nerdy side of women's health. Let's jump in.
Okay, so I had the opportunity to share a little bit more about my health story and what got me to where I am now and why I'm so passionate about hormones and gut health and all that. But I know you have some similarities maybe, and you definitely have your own health story. So I'd like to hear a bit more about that today.
Yeah. So, going back to when it all started, even as a kid, like before I had my own memories, my mom tells me about how I was chronically constipated. I do remember I had a book and it was my pooping book. And I would literally sit on the toilet and read through that book every single day. And I still have the book. It's now Charlie's book.
That's awesome. You're going to have to send me what that book looks like.
Yeah. I honestly don't even like reading it because it's like PTSD of, sitting on the toilet trying to push out a poop. But so yeah, that was like my entire childhood. In middle school, I started having more like classic lactose intolerance type symptoms. So still constipated, but like a lot of gassiness and just like my stomach hurt all the time. We talked about those gas pains that are just brutal.
Yes.
So having a lot of that. Right at this point, I was switching from gymnastics to dance. And this was a difficult transition for me because when I left gymnastics, I had a coach tell me that my ass was going to get fat.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I was 11. So then I was terrified about having a big butt. And then I go into middle school and I had friends commenting about my big butt. And that was just my shape. Mm-hmm. And I was also very strong because I was a gymnast. Yeah. And so I had a lot of muscle and I just had a bigger butt. But I took that as a bad thing because I thought my ass was fat.
Well, yeah. And if you have a coach to make a comment like that, and I can relate to that so much too, like in the dance world, like I have a much more muscular build too. And hopefully the coaches and teachers are shifting how they talk about bodies these days, but
yes. And from going to gymnastics to dance, that was hard body composition wise too, because gymnasts were just much more muscular and almost stocky. Yeah. And then I was going into ballet classes and I just felt like a giant compared to everybody. And I felt like I needed to be leaner. And then I was just a growing, middle schooler. And so sometimes my pants wouldn't fit and they were tight around my butt or around my thighs because I was more muscular. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started my own disordered eating struggles as well. And it coincided with my GI issues, which very much makes sense of like, I'm starting to cut back on what I'm eating. And then my stomach was hurting all the time. And I don't think I realized at the time that I was being picky about my food choices. Like I cut out, a decent amount of dairy products because of the lactose intolerance.
So at this point, you knew that you had lactose intolerance, right?
I was like, a doctor never told me. I would notice more tummy troubles with dairy, and I got like those lactate pills and I would take them when I would eat dairy and it would help me feel better. But I had to take one every single time I had dairy. And so I wasn't like gobbling up dairy all the time. Yeah. But I I think I was having like those body composition struggles, and then kind of restricting my food choices because of how my stomach was feeling. And I didn't put two and two together that I was like starting to cut back my calories. I think it was just all happening subconsciously. And that was through middle school. And then as I started getting into high school, and I made it onto our JV dance team my freshman year of high school. And in my head, I was like, I am not cut out for this. Like, I'm not a good enough dancer. I need to be better. So I started dancing a lot, and just like really pushing myself. I started restricting my calories a lot and just making very different food choices, where like I remember the thing that I ate was Cheerios. It was like the lowest calorie thing that I could find that I could like sit and munch on to make me feel like I was eating without giving me a lot of calories.
Yeah.
I also ate a lot of carrots. It's funny that you said that like some people are scared of carrots, but I ate so many carrots that I literally turned orange.
I remember you telling me about that. Oh my goodness. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I would bring like the biggest bag of carrots and just like munch on them all day in class. Cause again, it was like something that would kind of fill my stomach, but not provide calories. And I would also eat carrots after school.
It's just your go-to.
Yeah. Carrots and Cheerios.
Well-balanced diet.
Yeah.
It's funny. We already do have a lot of similarities here with our stories, but one difference is I think you really focused in on the calorie piece, and I focused in on the carbohydrate piece, which I think is interesting because I had, not to take over, I know this is your story, but I had similar moments where like I gave myself permission to eat things that were higher in fat, but still lower in carbs. I'm like, oh, this is okay. I can eat that. And then I end up kind of like binging it because I was so hungry. So I never turned orange from the foods I ate, but like similar thing of you find these things that are okay in your mind, that you give yourself permission, you kind of go overboard with it because you don't have this balance.
Right. Yeah. So I ended up losing a lot of weight over time. Pretty gradual, but very similar to you, I got a lot of those comments of like, you look really good. And I knew that I got to the point where I was like crying out for attention, where I was like, none of my clothes fit. Like I can't get my pants to buckle anymore. And like, you know, not calling out my parents at all, but they were like, man, you're working out way too hard and you're not eating enough. And so I just like allowed them to think that I was just working out really hard and that's why I was losing weight, and that I just like simply couldn't eat enough, even though I was like very intentionally not eating enough. And at the time, like total body dysmorphia, I thought that I looked good. And then my mom kept my freshman year pictures in our hallway all the way until I got my senior pictures done. And I hated that picture so much because my face was so thin.
You look gaunt.
Yes. I looked sickly to myself.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people would have looked at me and thought that. But
well, clearly not if they weren't really saying anything.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where I was too. Like now, if I look back on pictures when I was in like the thick of it, I definitely know I was too thin. But I think that's one of the, I don't know if I would say it's a benefit or maybe not a great thing. Like if you already have a more muscular build, it's very difficult to get, like you're in an extreme state if you get to the point where you look sickly thin, right? So yeah, you at least retained some muscle, but now looking back, you know that wasn't your healthiest.
Yeah. And we were both exercising so much that we were still maintaining some of that muscle mass.
Mhm.
And yeah. So, um, so it probably wasn't until like the middle of my sophomore year that I started eating a little bit more. And it was my parents putting a little bit more effort into, hey, we need to figure out how to make sure that you're eating enough. They didn't just leave that on me. Um, and so yeah, they helped me figure out how to eat more. And because they were constantly reminding me of like, you need to have a protein shake with breakfast, and they were watching what I was eating at dinner, it was like I don't know why I was crying out for all of this help, but it was enough of that attention that I needed of like, okay, this feels safe. I can eat a little bit more. I'm feeling better. I can dance better because I have more energy.
Imagine that.
Yes. But the gut issues, they were only getting worse over time. I got to the point where I couldn't, like the lactate pills weren't helping anymore. But I continued to eat dairy, like the two didn't click of like I should just stop eating dairy. And it was just a big part of our family and what we ate. Like we had yogurt and cottage cheese for snacks, and my mom was always cutting up like a big block of cheese, and we would have it as like a before dinner snack.
Yeah.
And so I think just like as a 16-year-old, I wasn't thinking that I should eliminate dairy from my diet and that might help things. So yeah, tons of bloating, tons of gas, still really bad constipation. And I felt like I just kind of suffered with it. But I was starting to eat more. I put on weight relatively rapidly, and it stressed me out, but I didn't know what else to do. Like I knew that cutting my calories back wasn't the right move. And it was like my body had been starving for so long that once I fueled myself, feeling really hungry was so miserable.
Yeah.
Like I would have all of this brain fog, and that was probably the biggest thing, is like I could not concentrate on anything if I didn't eat enough. So I didn't know how to like be a student and be a dancer and limit my food anymore. So like I kind of had to let that piece go, but then I was just miserable all the time. And then I think I just like when you're bloated all the time, you just feel bigger.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, you may not be any heavier.
Right.
You just feel blah. Even if you feel like puffy,
Yes.
Yeah, like a little bit of water retention. So I'm curious, at this point, because I feel like for some people, if you've had a certain symptom for a period of time, like it starts to just become a norm and you kind of just accept it. Were you kind of feeling that way without your gut issues? Like, hey, this is just kind of how it is. This is how my body is, and this is how it's going to be. Or were you feeling like, no, there's a way out of this. I'm going to find it.
No, I definitely felt like I'm stuck in this forever. Because at that point it had felt like, or it had been like 4 years of being bloated, having gas, and then my entire life being constipated. So I just felt like, especially the constipation piece, like it's just never going to go away.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I'm not sure what kind of switched things in high school. It might have been, I'm going to college soon and I need to figure this out. Or my mom was very into health and nutrition once I was in high school. And And so she had lots of friends that were also kind of the same mindset. So it might have been one of her friends or just something that she was doing. And this was like, like 2009, 2010. And I feel like that's when like food allergies were starting, like people were becoming a little bit more aware of them. So I decided that I would do a 2-week elimination diet, no gluten, no dairy. So I did that for 2 weeks. And after that, I reintroduced the gluten because at that time there were not good gluten-free options.
That's still debatable.
True. There's more options.
Definitely a lot more than there used to be.
So I reintroduced gluten first and felt totally fine. And then as soon as I reintroduced dairy, I was miserable. But it took me probably a full year to fully understand what foods had dairy, like how to read labels. I was going to school to be a dietitian, but I still like didn't know how to read a food label. Like it didn't cross my mind for a while that yogurt was dairy, which now I'm like, that's so silly to me.
What's funny is I remember, because I think a lot of people have this misunderstanding. I remember talking to you about it when we were in school, and I think a family member or something kept making this mistake that eggs are dairy.
Yes.
But you can tolerate eggs. That's not lactose. That's totally different. And
right.
Yeah, I don't know why they get kind of lumped in there, but I remember, I think we're at like a hamburger joint or something, and someone mentioned like you can't have eggs because they're dairy.
Yeah, it comes up with mayo all the time, and I think it's mayo's creamy.
Yeah, I guess so. It looks like dairy.
Yep, but it's egg based, and so yeah, all the time. Still, people think that I can't have mayo. I hear my baby crying again, so we'll see how this conversation continues.
You maybe put this on pause. Go take care of her.
Let's pause for a second.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. Baby has joined us. So yes, I was learning about what foods had dairy and how to keep that out of my diet, but I still wasn't feeling great, but I knew I felt better when I didn't eat dairy. And then there was one time, it was pretty early on, like first semester of college. I went back home to San Diego to just visit my family, and I was out at breakfast with my mom, and I think my aunt was there, and I was so miserable that I just burst out in tears while we were eating breakfast. And I said, I literally don't want to eat anything because I'm in so much pain and I don't know what's causing this.
So challenging.
So we called our like family doctor, and they were able to get me in that day. And she said that she wanted to do an ultrasound and see what was going on. And it was too expensive for us to do the ultrasound. And so she suggested that I take Miralax every single day, digestive enzymes with every meal.
Oh, that's interesting.
A probiotic.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised by the digestive enzymes.
Yep. So I did all of those every single day for about 2 years. And it helped, but I would take Miralax every day and not go to the bathroom every day. So when you talk about pooping in the dorm the first year, that was so miserable. And I was taking Miralax every day and wasn't always going. I was still constipated. Sometimes, then it's tipping to the other end of diarrhea.
I was gonna say, this might be TMI for some people, but like if you haven't gone for a while, like it's not pretty once you do. And doing that in the dorm bathrooms, like middle of the night when no one's there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I was so regimented with everything. I knew that if I had a cup of black coffee and oatmeal for breakfast, that would help me. Like I'd be more likely to go to the bathroom that day. Morning classes were sometimes so brutal because it would throw off my routine in the morning and I wouldn't be able to have like a space where I could go to the bathroom.
Get that poop window that you can't go out of.
Yes. It was so miserable. And even into my third year of college, I remember there being times when I would need to take a laxative because the Miralax and all the other things
weren't doing the trick.
wasn't cutting it. And I almost pooped my pants in I don't even remember the class. I think it was nutrition and aging. It was a 7:30 a.m. class. And in the middle of the class, classes. It came on. And I ran and went to the bathroom and I went and sat back down and it came on again. And I was like, I'm going home. Ugh. We are done with classes for the day.
Yeah. Oh man.
So I slowly tapered myself off of all of the medications. It's so similar to your story where I was like, these medications aren't making things all the way better.
Yeah.
So why am I still doing this? There must be some underlying cause. And I just have to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
So I started eating a more diverse diet. I was just eating bland. Yeah. And oatmeal.
And Cheerios.
Yeah, very bland food. So I started eating a more diverse diet. I kind of switched up my exercise routine. I think I was exercising a little too aggressively, but I found that like if I would go for a walk, it would help a lot. And then I got really, really fine-tuned on the dairy piece. Like I would not even buy bread that had milk in the ingredient list. And I didn't really eat out a lot because I couldn't be confident of what had dairy in it or not.
That's challenging.
So after doing that for probably about a year, I feel like by my fourth year of college, I was feeling a lot better. I would not say that I was still pooping I wasn't pooping every day, but it was the point where I felt like, okay, this is manageable and I don't have to take all of these medications all the time.
Yeah.
And I just kind of lived like that through grad school and my internship, moving around. I finally landed in Utah. And I had gone through a divorce and realized that I needed to work on my own mental health and some trauma that I had been through. And I started seeing a therapist. This was not the first therapist I had seen, but she specialized in EMDR. And we dove into my trauma, and that is when I feel like my bloating and constipation fully resolved, which is just wild to me. But now that I know how much stress affects our body, which is going to affect like our entire GI system,
100%,
it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But that was the missing piece for me, was all of the stress that I was holding. So I still like don't eat any dairy whatsoever. It wrecks my stomach every single time. But for the most part, bloating is gone. I've actually had some struggles postpartum this go around. I didn't have any issues after Charlie, but this time, like a lot of my gas, bloating, constipation, a lot of that has come back. But I feel so much more confident now knowing how to work through it. that it's not an added stressor. It's just something else that I'm having to work through again.
I think that's a really good point too, because I think a lot of people see either it's like weight loss or bloating or whatever, like you get to this point where it's never going to come back. But again, you're going to go through seasons of life. There's going to be stressors. There's going to be some potential triggers, right? It's not that you live a life that you're never bloated, you never have hormonal struggles, you never maybe need to lose a few pounds, whatever it is. It's just a matter of knowing how to address it so you can catch it before it impacts your life so significantly. That's a perfect example. I want to make sure you have time to add more, but I also want to, I know we're going to talk about this on future episodes, but to point out you'd mentioned the trauma with the going to therapy and everything, how that made a biggest, but it also like, there's so many things that contributed to like stress pieces that contributed. So you mentioned like cutting down on exercise. And I think a lot of people will be a little bit caught off guard by that, because when you're feeling bloated, when you're feeling like bigger because you're feeling bloated, you feel like you need to work out more, right? You think you need to lose weight, but the reality is that could be feeding into the cycle. And that was the case for you, right? Because that increased exercise could be putting that, like exercise is a stress on the body, which can be very beneficial, but in some situations, it's just a little bit too much, right? So we need to address like what it was. And for you in that case, there's too many things pouring into your stress bucket.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I was training for a half marathon, third year of college.
That. You got stress fracture, didn't you?
I did. I got a stress fracture.
Your body's like, nope, we're not doing.
Yep. And I hate it because even now I still can't run, because if I run more than like 3 miles, my foot still hurts.
Ugh.
So, but I don't even like running, so I don't know why I even try.
I'm the same way. I'm like, I had it in my mind that I needed to do a half marathon at some point in my life. I don't know, it's because of you and Ashley that was just like, I need to do this because they're doing it or whatever. I'm the same way. Like, I wish I liked running, but I don't.
Yeah. But I think it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise because it forced me to slow down. And all I could do at that point was walk, but I was on crutches for a while and I did a lot of like the stationary bike. And yeah, just forced me to slow down.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a theme, like some of the blood sugar, that the stress and nervous system piece, that's going to come up a lot in our discussions as well. And maybe interviews that we do with therapists or trauma specialists and stuff as well, because you and I really see the body as a whole, right? So we have our area of expertise, but in nutrition, and that's obviously what we focus on, but we also recognize that the past trauma, stress, and all that are going to impact how our body is breaking down and utilizing the nutrients that we consume. So we can't ignore that.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so interesting now going through similar symptoms that I had in the past, but my approach is completely different. So I know whenever I'm feeling, a little more constipated, that I have to really check in with, okay, how lenient am I being with dairy? How often are we going out to eat? To make sure that I eliminate any of those extra, trace amounts coming in. And then I take magnesium every single day already because I need it for sleep and stress.
Yeah.
But I always have glycinate and citrate on hand so that I can kind of toggle back and forth based on my needs.
Tools in your toolbox that you can rely on.
Yes. Yep. And then being a breastfeeding mom, I really have to drink a lot more water and be super mindful of it. And honestly, that's probably the biggest difference of this postpartum period versus my first is I only had one potato before, and now I have a toddler that's running around and that I have to keep busy and entertained plus my potato. And it's a lot harder to make sure that I'm drinking enough water throughout the day and all of that. So that's always my first check of like, oh, my stomach's not feeling great. Have I actually been drinking enough water? And it goes back to the basics that we're talking about.
100%. I will throw in another basic that I don't think you did first time go around postpartum that you are doing now. And I think you've talked about how it's helped with energy is your minerals. And so that true hydration versus just like downing the water that's not actually hydrating those cells. So that's a big piece of it too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's when I'm at the point where like I have a headache because I am like clearly dehydrated.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do minerals twice a day. Like I do them pretty much every single morning because I just do them when I'm taking my other supplements.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes mid-afternoon, like I kind of have a headache and I'm feeling dehydrated and like I need to do some more of this.
Another perfect example how you can adjust things. So it's a foundational piece to do like regular, but sometimes we need a little bit more, sometimes we need a little bit less.
Yep.
Like having that confidence to adjust it.
Yeah. And then the other huge thing that has been so helpful is pelvic PT. And I do a bunch of like colon massage and I do it too, but having somebody else do that, it's just different. Because sometimes it hurts and it's hard to like push yourself to the point where something hurts even though you know it's helping.
Mm-hmm.
So to have somebody else kind of take over and be like, oh, like that's tender and that hurts, but like, okay, keep going. I got this.
Because then you could focus on yourself and getting through it versus having to do that physical manipulation too. And I think we've talked about this, but having like a pelvic floor therapist on would be interesting too, because that can definitely impact our gut health, constipation, and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like those are my foundational pieces. Definitely not going the Miralax route.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never go back to that. But also, like, yes, it was better that she recommended probiotics and digestive enzymes. But I now know that that's really just a Band-Aid fix. That's, sometimes probiotics, like if the only issue is like a little bit of dysbiosis, probiotics can help with that. But rarely is just probiotics going to like get to the root cause and resolve things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think maybe we'll talk about this on another episode too, but I think that's where sometimes people move over to more of a functional medicine approach, but sometimes they're just using the same conventional thing. Like, oh, instead of medication, I'm just going to like supplement all this, right? I'm going to add probiotics and digestive enzymes on top of it. And then you just take that forever. And that goes back to what we talked about. I think it was on the last episode when I was talking about my story and just people add all these medications and supplements and not really evaluating what they're doing or why they're needing them in the first place too. And so I think it's fine if we need things like magnesium long term, but we understand why and we're doing the other things so we're not just relying on that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we'll probably have to talk about just magnesium.
Yeah, a whole episode on magnesium.
But I know that magnesium is resolving my constipation, but also helping my sleep and helping me manage my stress levels better. Like it's doing so many things for me. And there's none of those side effects where I'm like, oh, now I also have to be doing these other things because I'm taking magnesium.
And you're using it truly as a supplement. Like you're still trying to get that, you're still getting a well-balanced diet. You're pulling in some magnesium rich foods where you can, but it's challenging to get some of those nutrients and get them to the level that we need during during a healing process or postpartum. Like our needs do fluctuate. And so that's where that supplement can be key for sure. So now I think we're getting off track. Is there anything you wanted to add about your health journey or maybe something encouraging to some of the moms out there who are maybe in a similar postpartum period?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, and I'm sure you're going to completely agree, is that you are not stuck with your symptoms forever. You can
100%.
feel better. And that's what we love doing with our patients every single day, is getting to that point where they're like, oh my gosh, I feel better. Like I have more energy, or I'm pooping every day, or, I feel good.
Yeah. And then you start to, it's the little things that a lot of people take for granted, right? Like having that energy, thinking clearly, pooping every day. So yes, 100%. I do agree. And I'm excited to dive into all these other topics.
Yes, we have endless things to talk about.
Yes. But of course, if you hear anything that we bring up here and you want us to dive into it a bit deeper, feel free to reach out. Reach out to us on Instagram. I'm dietitian Haley on Instagram, and dietitian Kaitlyn. Is that the best place for them to reach out to you there?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So we will put that information somewhere for you to look at. But I think anything that we bring up that you want us to dive into a bit more, feel free to reach out. We're always interested in hearing what you guys want to hear more about, but we do have a lot of ideas and a lot of things we're going to dive into this season. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.